A Birkin bag costs approximately $800 to produce. It retails for $12,000, sometimes $40,000, sometimes more. The leather did not change. The stitching did not change. The hardware did not change. What changed is the story wrapped around it. And that specific, carefully engineered, psychologically precise story is worth more than every factory, every atelier, and every piece of inventory the brand owns combined. This video is about who builds that story, and why you were never supposed to understand how. Please subscribe and activate the button to help us reach 1,000 subscribers, so we can bring you more relevant content, and so YouTube can notify you when we publish new videos. The most expensive thing a luxury brand owns has never appeared on any balance sheet. Not the factories in Switzerland or the ateliers in Paris or the flagship stores on streets whose addresses alone carry weight. Not the archive, the decades of preserved designs, the historical pieces in climate-controlled vaults, the documentation of craft traditions that predate living memory. Not the real estate, not the inventory, not the distribution network, not the relationships with suppliers whose materials make the objects possible. The most expensive thing a luxury brand owns is the gap. The specific, carefully maintained, psychologically engineered gap between what the product costs to make and what the market will pay to own it. That gap, which in the case of the most significant luxury brands runs not to double or triple the production cost, but to multiples that would collapse instantly in any other consumer category, is not the result of superior craftsmanship alone. It is the result of strategy. Decades of deliberate, disciplined, ruthlessly protected strategy oriented toward a single outcome. Making the object mean more than the object is. Most businesses make their products as good as possible and price accordingly. Luxury brands invert this completely. They establish the perception of value first, then they build the product to meet it. The product is the proof of the price, not the justification for it. And the proof is constructed not primarily through the quality of materials or the skill of making, though both matter, and the floor of genuine craft is non-negotiable, but through the architecture of meaning surrounding the object before any customer ever touches it. That architecture is built from three materials: scarcity, narrative, and social proof at the exact altitude required to signal the right things to the right people without becoming legible enough to lose its power. Now consider what this means for the numbers that never get published. Bernard Arnault, chairman of LVMH, the largest luxury conglomerate on earth, controlling Louis Vuitton, Dior, Bulgari, Tiffany, Moet, and dozens of others, has never disclosed the production volumes of his most significant brands. Louis Vuitton does not reveal how many bags it produces annually. Hermès does not confirm Birkin output. Chanel does not publish the relationship between production cost and retail price. These are not oversight omissions. They are strategic decisions, maintained across decades, across management transitions, across every external pressure to be more transparent. Because the information, if publicly available, would destroy something worth considerably more than any individual product line. It would destroy the mythology. The mythology requires not knowing, requires the customer to experience the price as the natural expression of something ineffable, of heritage, of irreproducible quality, of the specific aura that surrounds objects made by people who are the best in the world at what they do. The moment the customer can calculate the margin, the moment the number becomes visible as a commercial decision rather than a cultural one, the mythology weakens. Not catastrophically. Not immediately. Like all great structures, weakening slowly at first, then faster, then irreversibly. So the information stays hidden. The mythology stays intact. The gap stays as wide as the mythology can sustain. And the mythology, maintained with sufficient discipline over sufficient time, can sustain a gap that would seem obscene if anyone said it out loud in a room without the mythology present. But here is the part that most analysis of luxury strategy misses entirely. The gap is not simply about price. The gap is a psychological instrument. It tells the customer something specific before a single word of copy has been read or a single advertisement has been seen. It tells them, this object is not for everyone. The price itself is the first filter, the first signal. The first communication that you are considering is not a product decision but a position decision. A position in a hierarchy, and the hierarchy invisible, uncodified, never formally declared but universally understood by the people inside it, is what the brand is actually selling. Not leather, not steel, not glass. A position. The price is the entry requirement. The gap between the cost and the price is the size of the door. And the brands that have built the largest gaps have built the most exclusive doors. What happens on the other side of the door is where the strategy becomes genuinely dangerous. The waiting list is not a queue. This is the first thing to understand about how luxury brands weaponize scarcity. A queue is neutral. First in, first served. Resources allocated by timing, no judgment, no evaluation. No signal transmitted about the relative worth of the people waiting. A luxury allocation system is the opposite of neutral. Every decision about who receives what, when, through which channel, at which location, every single one of those decisions is a deliberate communication. A signal transmitted to the recipient about their position in a hierarchy that the brand controls completely and that the recipient has, in most cases, spent significant time and money trying to ascend. At Hermès, the path to a Birkin does not begin with a request for a Birkin. It begins with a relationship, with the systematic building of a purchase history: scarves, belts, home objects, smaller leather goods at a pace and in categories that communicate genuine engagement rather than speculative acquisition. The customer who walks in and asks directly for a Birkin is told, with varying degrees of politeness, it does not work that way. What the customer is actually being told is this: you have not yet earned the right to spend your money here at this level. Come back when you have demonstrated that you belong. That communication, delivered without malice, as simply the natural expression of how the institution operates, is one of the most psychologically sophisticated commercial moves in the history of consumer business. It converts spending money into an audition. It makes financial capacity irrelevant and cultural legibility the operative criterion. And it produces, in the customers who eventually pass the audition, a relationship with the brand that no conventional marketing could ever generate. They earned it. The brand told them they earned it. And people will defend to a degree that consistently surprises outside observers the systems that produce their own positive self-narratives. But here is the shock revelation that changes the entire picture. The waiting list serves a second function that is never discussed in any brand communications. It is an intelligence operation. Every customer who enters the qualification process reveals information about their spending capacity, about their aesthetic preferences, about their social context, which city, which events, which other brands they engage with, which cultural signals they carry, about the pace and seriousness of their engagement with the brand, about what they respond to and what leaves them cold. This information flows upward, it is aggregated, it is analyzed, and it is converted into the most valuable commercial intelligence available in the luxury market, a real-time, granular, continuously updated picture of what the wealthiest and most culturally influential consumers in the world actually want. Not what they say they want, what they do. The luxury conglomerate that controls multiple brands across multiple categories sits at the center of this intelligence operation at a scale that no external analyst can approach. LVMH knows, in real time, what consumers across dozens of markets and dozens of product categories are moving toward with a lead time that runs anywhere from 6 months to 2 years ahead of what becomes visible in publicly reported trends. This informational advantage is not an accident. It is the designed output of customer relationship architectures that were built, at considerable expense, for exactly this purpose. And the brands that control this information make decisions about product development, about geographic expansion, about which categories to enter and which to exit that appear, to outside observers, like extraordinary commercial intuition. It is not intuition. It is proximity to the right data, maintained over decades, through relationships built for exactly this purpose. The bag on the shelf is the visible result of a decision made 18 months ago, based on intelligence that no competitor had access to, executed through a supply chain, calibrated to deliver exactly enough product to sustain the mythology without satisfying the demand. Everything about it is deliberate, including the fact that it looks effortless. Especially that, in 1987, Patek Philippe ran an advertisement that had nothing to do with watches. The image was of a father and a son. 2 people, a moment. The copy read, "You never actually own a Patek Philippe, you merely look after it for the next generation." Read that again. They told you in a paid advertisement, for a commercial product, that you do not own it, that the transaction you are about to complete does not transfer possession in any meaningful sense, that what you are acquiring is not the object but the responsibility of the object. And sales increased. Because that advertisement was not selling a watch, it was selling an identity. A specific, emotionally precise vision of a kind of person, a person of sufficient depth, sufficient substance, sufficient connection to something that extends beyond their own life, for whom this kind of responsibility is appropriate. You buy the watch, you become the person. That mechanism, the conversion of commercial transactions into identity acquisition, is the most powerful engine of desire the luxury industry has ever built. And once you see it operating in that Patek advertisement, you cannot stop seeing it everywhere. The Rolex worn by Edmund Hillary on the summit of Everest in 1953. The image was real. But Rolex did not simply document a historical event. They built an entire architecture of meaning around it, the watch that went where nothing was supposed to survive, that kept time at the absolute limit of human endurance, and attached that architecture permanently to every Rolex produced before and after. You buy a watch in 2025. The summit comes with it. The proof of human endurance at the limit comes with it. The 70 years of everyone who wore one and did something worth doing all of it transfers, instantly, through the object. That is not advertising. That is identity manufacturing at industrial scale. Now watch what happens when the story collides with social media, because this is where the strategy reveals its most elegant dimension. The brands that dominated the last decade did not dominate because they made better products. They dominated because they understood something that no marketing budget could have produced deliberately, but that their mythology made inevitable. Every person who posted their Birkin, their Rolex, their Ferrari. Every person who inserted a luxury signal into their personal narrative voluntarily, enthusiastically, with genuine emotional investment was doing the brand's identity manufacturing work. For free. Better than free. Authentically. Because a person's genuine emotional connection to an object carries credibility that no paid advertisement can replicate. It reaches networks that paid media cannot access. It converts the brand's mythology into personal testimony, and personal testimony, in an attention economy saturated with manufactured content, is the scarcest and most valuable communication currency available. The customer became the content. The desire became the distribution. Here is the shock. The brands knew this would happen. Not in 2010 when Instagram launched. Before, the entire architecture of the luxury desire system, the identity offers, the credential systems, the mythology investments was designed from the beginning to produce people who feel so genuinely, personally, authentically connected to the brand that they carry its message into every social context they inhabit. The Hermès customer who defends the waiting list at a dinner party is not an employee. The Rolex collector who corrects a misidentification across the room is not a spokesperson. The Ferrari owner who tells the story of earning their allocation is not running a campaign. They are all doing unpaid marketing work, with real passion, for brands that spent decades engineering exactly that passion in exactly that person. The desire is genuine. The engineering of the desire is also genuine. Both things are true simultaneously. That is what makes the system so difficult to exit. Not because it deceives you, because it produces something real inside you and then monetizes the real thing it produced. You were not manipulated into feeling something false. You were guided into feeling something real. That costs someone a great deal of money to arrange, and it will cost you considerably more to sustain. Everything covered so far, the scarcity engineering, the information advantage, the mythology, and the identity manufacturing, is the layer that faces outward, toward customers, toward culture, toward you. But there is an inner layer, a layer that faces toward power itself, toward the rooms where real decisions get made. And what happens in those rooms is more deliberate and more consequential than any campaign ever launched. The luxury brand is a political instrument, not a metaphor, not rhetorical escalation. A precise, operational description of a function that the most significant luxury brands have served throughout their entire history for their owners and for the broader class of people who constitute their core customers. The function is the legitimization of hierarchy. Every durable social order requires a cultural infrastructure that makes the hierarchy feel natural, not constructed, not maintained through deliberate effort, not the result of specific historical decisions that could have gone differently. Natural. the expression of genuine differences in quality, taste, cultivation, and worth between the people at the top and the people below them. Luxury brands provide that infrastructure. And here is the mechanism in its most concrete form. Two candidates walk into a room for a meeting with a senior partner at a significant private equity firm. Both have comparable credentials. Both are articulate and prepared. Both are genuinely qualified. One carries a Patek Philippe reference that took 2 years to source, wears a suit whose tailor is known to the partner, mentions, in passing, a club whose membership they share, uses a specific vocabulary, not financial jargon, something subtler than the precise aesthetic grammar of a life constructed at the right altitude. The other does not. The partner does not consciously decide to favor the first candidate. He does not run a deliberate calculation. He experiences something more ambient, a comfort, a recognition, the involuntary ease of being with someone who reads as belonging. That ease is not personal chemistry. It is the output of decades of cultural programming, a programming that the luxury system delivered, and that installed in the partner a set of evaluative signals that reliably favored people who had access to the formation that produces those signals, and then made access to that formation expensive, time-consuming, and socially restricted enough that the people who have it are overwhelmingly people whose families already had it. The system is not selecting for competence. It is selected for legibility. And the criteria for legibility were written by the people who already passed the test. Now extend this into the regulatory dimension, because this is where the consequences move beyond individual careers into the architecture of entire industries. The official who grew up attending the right schools, who belongs to the right clubs, whose dinner party conversations over 20 years have given him a picture of the industries he regulates colored by the perspective of the people who built them. That official is not corrupt. He is not receiving envelopes. He is a person whose genuine, sincere assessment of what constitutes good policy has been shaped, without his awareness, by sustained proximity to the people who benefit from that assessment. The influence required no transaction. It required proximity. And proximity was manufactured through exactly the desire management system we have been examining, through the clubs, the schools, the aesthetic markers, the social architectures that brought the right people into the same rooms over long enough periods that their worldviews quietly converged. No coordination declared, no conspiracy assembled. Just culture, doing what culture does, reproducing the conditions of its own existence. Now understand the commercial implication of this for the brands themselves. The luxury brand that maintains its position as a cultural credential that is recognized as a marker of legitimate belonging by the people who control access to significant rooms has a moat that no competitor can breach through product quality alone, because the competitor would need to match not just the object but the position the object holds in a social technology that has been operating for generations. The established brand is not protected by its products. It is protected by the social agreement that its products represent. And social agreements, once embedded deeply enough in the behavioral patterns of the people who use them, are among the most resistant things to displacement that human civilization produces. The new entrant with a better bag is not competing with Hermès. They are competing with the consensus of 1,000 dinners, 100,000 social assessments, 50 years of cultural reinforcement that has made the Hermès signal mean exactly what it means to exactly the people whose opinion shapes the market. That consensus cannot be outspent. It can only be outlasted. And the brands at the top of the hierarchy have no intention of being outlasted. They have been building consensus longer than most of their competitors have existed. There is a question that arrives eventually, for everyone who follows this analysis to its conclusion. If the system is this sophisticated, this deeply embedded, this structurally resistant, this comprehensively maintained by the most resourced cultural production apparatus in history, what does understanding it actually change? The answer is not revolutionary. It is personal, and it is more powerful than it initially sounds. Seeing the mechanism changes what the mechanism can do to you. Not to the market, not to culture, not to the broader social order. Those operate at a scale that individual understanding does not directly affect, but to your specific decisions, made with your specific resources, on your specific trajectory. And at that scale, a single life, a single accumulation of choices about where to direct attention and money and aspiration. The difference between operating inside the mechanism without seeing it and operating with full awareness of what it is doing is the difference between being a participant and being a strategist. The participant spends in response to desires they experience as personal, but that were produced by a system designed to produce exactly those desires in exactly their demographic. They compete for markers whose value was established by people with a commercial interest in the competition. They measure progress against standards whose definition was outsourced, without consent, to organizations that need the standards defined in ways requiring continuous spending to approach. The strategist sees the desire and asks, before responding, "Is this mine? Does pursuing this serve any interest I actually hold, or only the interest of the system that produced the pursuit?" That pause between the desire and the response to the desire is not available to the participant. It is fully available to the strategist. Now apply this to the business dimension, because the understanding of how luxury brands actually operate is not only a tool for personal clarity, it is a template, a refined, historically tested, extraordinarily successful template for building products and experiences that command premiums far beyond what their material components justify. The principles are not proprietary. They have been practiced in public, in plain sight, for long enough that their operation is legible to anyone who looks carefully and honestly at what is actually happening. Manage the meaning before you manage the product. The product proves the meaning. The meaning determines the price. Get this order wrong and no amount of product quality will close the gap. Control access more carefully than you control anything else. The moment the object is easy to find, it stops meaning what you need it to mean. Availability is not just a missed revenue opportunity, it is an active destruction of the signal that justifies every price you have ever charged. Invest in the story longer than any single financial cycle requires. The story compounds. Every year you maintain it, it becomes harder for a competitor to displace. Every generation that grows up inside it adds their experience to the evidence that it is true. Commercial thinking is quarterly. Brand thinking is generational. The brands that have compounded the longest are the ones whose owners never allowed a quarter's performance to override a century's trajectory. Make the customer's relationship with the brand part of the customer's story about themselves, not their story about the brand. Their story about themselves. Attach your identity offer to the part of human psychology that defends positive self-narratives with more ferocity than it defends almost any external position, and you have a customer whose loyalty is no longer transactional. And understand at the deepest level of strategic clarity what you are actually selling, never the object. The object is the delivery mechanism. What you are selling is a feeling about the person who owns it. Build the feeling, protect the feeling, refuse every short-term commercial opportunity that compromises the feeling, because the feeling is the business. Everything else is execution. These principles built the empires examined in this video. They are available to anyone who applies them with the discipline those empires applied. The difference between the brands worth billions and the brands that should have been worth billions is not the quality of the product at launch. It is the consistency of the discipline over time. The willingness to protect the gap between what the object costs and what it means against every pressure, internal and external, to close it. The gap is the strategy. The gap is the business. The gap is, in the end, the only thing that was ever truly for sale. Everything else was the story they built to make crossing it feel worth every dollar. And now you know who built the story, which means for the first time, you get to decide whether you are still willing to pay for it. Luxury power exists for one reason only, to reveal what the elite pay to hide. Subscribe to Luxury Power and hit the bell now. Every week, a new secret is uncovered. Drop in the comments where you're watching from. We love knowing our global audience. Everything you saw here is based on real cases, verified contracts, and documented facts. We don't glorify wealth, we dissect it. Do you still think money buys freedom? Tell us in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to see the truth. And remember, even the most expensive life can be a gilded cage. See you in the next video.